You have her eyes. The words struck Rowena Finch like a blow. She stood frozen in the doorway of the Greystone Estate's portrait gallery, a stack of laundered linens clutched against her chest, staring at the tall figure who had spoken without turning around. Lord Greystone, the master of the house whose arrival 3 days prior had sent the entire staff into nervous preparation, stood before a painting she had never been permitted to see. The portrait was covered with a black cloth whenever she passed through this wing, but now the fabric lay pooled on the floor like spilled ink. The woman in the painting wore a gown of midnight blue, her dark hair swept up to reveal a slender neck. But it was the face that made Rowena's breath catch, the wide-set hazel eyes, the determined set of the jaw, the small scar just above the left eyebrow. She could have been looking into a mirror, save for the elaborate dress and the confidence in that painted gaze that Rowena had never possessed. "Who is she?" Rowena heard herself ask, though she knew she should retreat, apologize for the intrusion, disappear back into the servants' corridors where she belonged. Lord Greystone turned then, and Rowena understood why the housekeeper had warned the maids to avoid him. He was beautiful in a way that seemed wrong, too perfect, too still, like a statue given breath. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and when they fixed on her face, she felt pinned like a butterfly to velvet. "Her name was Marguerite," he said softly. "She died 147 years ago." The linen slipped from Rowena's arms. She should have laughed at the absurdity, should have backed away from this madman who claimed to remember someone from the previous century. Instead, she found herself stepping closer to the portrait, drawn by the impossible familiarity of that face. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Very little about me is possible, Miss Finch." He knew her name. She had been working at Greystone for only 6 weeks, hired after her father's shipping business collapsed beneath a mountain of debt, taking their comfortable life with it. She was nobody here, just another housemaid in a gray dress, invisible to the gentry who occasionally visited. Yet he looked at her as though she were the only person in the world. "I need to deliver these to the West Wing," Rowena said, bending to gather the scattered linens. Her hands shook. "I apologize for disturbing you, my lord." "Don't." His voice was quiet but commanding. "Don't apologize for existing." She never did. Rowena straightened, linens bundled awkwardly in her arms, and met his gaze. "I am not her." A shadow passed like a bird's wing across his face. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. "No," he agreed. "You're not." She would never have been found scrubbing floors. The words stung because they were true. 6 months ago, Rowena had been the daughter of a prosperous merchant, with 3 seasons behind her and prospects for a respectable match. Then the creditors had come, and the house had been sold, and her mother had taken ill from the shock of it all. Rowena had found work where she could, grateful that Greystone's housekeeper had overlooked her lack of references in favor of her neat handwriting and ability to read. "My circumstances have changed," she said stiffly. "Now if you'll excuse me, have dinner with me." Rowena stared at him. "That's impossible." "Why?" "Because you're Lord Greystone and I'm a housemaid. Because it would cost me my position. Because—" She stopped, searching for words that wouldn't reveal how much the invitation tempted her. "Because it isn't done. I've lived long enough to see many things that aren't done become commonplace." He moved closer, and Rowena noticed that his footsteps made no sound on the wooden floor. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Miss Finch. I'm asking you to share a meal and tell me how a woman with your diction and bearing came to be folding linens in my house." "You want my story?" Rowena felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. "It's quite ordinary. My father made poor investments. We lost everything. I work now because the alternative is starvation. There. You have it." "That's the outline," Lord Greystone said. "Not the story." Rowena should have refused, should have fled back to the safety of the servants' quarters and forgotten this strange encounter. Instead, she found herself nodding once, sharply. "Where?" "The conservatory, midnight." He smiled, and Rowena saw that his teeth were very white and very straight. Don't worry about the household. I'll ensure you're not missed. How? I have some influence here. His smile widened slightly. After all, I do own the place. Rowena watched him leave, moving with a grace that seemed almost inhuman. Only when he was gone did she realize she had agreed to a midnight assignation with a man who claimed to remember events from over a century ago. A man who looked at her and saw someone else. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt alive for the first time since her father's death. The conservatory at midnight was a jungle of shadows and silver moonlight. Rowena had changed from her gray work dress into the only decent gown she still owned, a simple affair of dark green wool that had been her mother's. She felt ridiculous, sneaking through the house like a thief, but when she pushed open the conservatory door and saw Lord Greystone waiting beside a small table set with china and silver, she was grateful she had made the effort. "You came," he said, and she heard genuine surprise in his voice. "I said I would." Rowena stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. The air was warm and thick with the scent of orchids. "Though I'm still not certain why I agreed." "Because you're curious." He pulled out a chair for her, a gesture so natural she almost didn't notice the presumption of it. "And because you recognize something in that portrait." Rowena sat, watching as he poured wine into her glass. "I recognized a face that happens to resemble mine. Nothing more." "Is that what you tell yourself?" He took the seat across from her, but she noticed he didn't pour wine for himself. "That it's mere coincidence?" "What else could it be?" Rowena lifted her glass, then set it down without drinking. "You can't possibly believe I'm some sort of reincarnation. That's spiritualist nonsense." "I don't know what you are," Lord Greystone said quietly. "I only know that when I saw you in the portrait gallery, my heart, which hasn't truly beaten in 2 centuries, remembered what it was to feel." The words hung between them, impossible and sincere. Rowena forced herself to breathe. "You're mad." "Quite possibly." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling ice-colored eyes. "Tell me about your father." The change of subject was so abrupt that Rowena answered without thinking. "He was a good man, honest. Too honest, perhaps. He trusted the wrong people, made investments based on friendship rather than sense." She picked up her fork, though no food had yet been served. "He died believing he had failed us. I never got to tell him that he hadn't." "What would you have told him?" "That he taught me to read, to think, to value knowledge over appearances." Rowena met Lord Greystone's gaze. "That because of him, I can survive this. I'm not some delicate flower who withers when transplanted. I can work. I can endure." "Marguerite said something similar once." His voice was distant, remembering. "She was the daughter of a comte, raised for nothing but ornament. Then the revolution came, and she discovered she was far stronger than anyone had imagined." "What happened to her?" "She died, protecting people she loved." Lord Greystone's expression was unreadable. "I couldn't save her. I've spent nearly a century and a half wishing I could have that night back." Rowena set down her fork. "Is that why you invited me here? Because you see her when you look at me?" "I invited you here because I needed to know if you were real." He stood, moving to the window. "For weeks, I've watched you from the shadows of this house. I've seen you reading in the library after your work is done, sitting in the window seat with books you shouldn't be able to access. I've heard you humming the same melody Marguerite used to sing, and I've told myself it was coincidence, that grief was making me see patterns where none existed." "But?" Rowena stood as well, drawn by something she couldn't name. "But then I saw you in the portrait gallery, and the resemblance was undeniable." He turned to face her. "I need to know the truth, Miss Finch. I need to know if you're simply a woman who happens to look like someone I lost, or if you're something more." "How would we determine that?" Rowena heard the tremor in her own voice. "I could show you my true nature." Lord Greystone moved closer, and Rowena saw something shift in his eyes, a flash of red, there and gone. I could prove that the impossible exists, but once you see, you can never unsee. Once you know what I am, your life will never be the same. Rowena thought of the portrait, of the woman who looked like her but carried herself with such confidence. She thought of her father, who had taught her to seek truth even when it was uncomfortable. She thought of the gray dress hanging in her tiny room, of the endless days of scrubbing and folding and pretending she was content with survival. "Show me," she said. Lord Greystone smiled, and this time she saw his teeth properly, the elongated canines that marked him as something other than human. "As you wish." He moved so quickly she barely saw it, crossing the space between them in a heartbeat. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Rowena placed her hand in his and felt the coldness of his skin. No pulse beat beneath that marble flesh. No warmth radiated from him. He was beautiful and terrible and impossible, and she should have been screaming. Instead, she stepped closer. "What are you?" she whispered. "A monster who has lived too long." His fingers closed gently around hers. "A creature who feeds on blood and walks in darkness. A man who loved a woman 2 centuries ago and has been haunting the world ever since, looking for a reason to continue existing." "And you think I'm that reason?" "I think you might be." He raised her hand to his lips, not quite touching, just hovering there. "Or I think you might simply be yourself, and that might be enough." Rowena felt something shift inside her chest. "I'm not her. I don't remember any past life. I don't have her memories or her courage or her grace." "No," Lord Greystone agreed. "You have your own. And perhaps that's what I need to learn. How to see you for who you are, rather than who you resemble." Before Rowena could respond, the conservatory door burst open. A woman stood in the entrance, her traveling cloak still dusty from the road, her face twisted with fury. "So it's true," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You found another one." Lord Greystone released Rowena's hand and turned. "Lady Ashford, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly." The woman, Lady Ashford, stepped into the conservatory, her gaze fixed on Rowena with undisguised contempt. "Tell me, does this one know what you are? Or are you planning to seduce her first and reveal your nature after she's too entangled to escape?" "That's enough." Lord Greystone's voice was cold. "Is it?" Lady Ashford laughed. "I've traveled from London because I heard rumors that you were courting a housemaid. I told myself it couldn't be true. You wouldn't be so foolish as to risk everything we've built for a passing resemblance." "What we've built?" Lord Greystone moved to stand between Lady Ashford and Rowena. "You've built nothing but a network of lies and manipulation. I want no part of it." "You have no choice." Lady Ashford's eyes flashed red. "The Covenant demands discretion. You cannot parade a human woman who looks exactly like Marguerite Beaumont through London society without attracting attention. The hunters are already asking questions." Rowena felt ice settle in her stomach. "Hunters?" "Humans who have made it their mission to destroy our kind," Lord Greystone said without turning. "They've been tracking me for decades, waiting for me to make a mistake." "And now you have." Lady Ashford smiled. "They know about her. They know about the resemblance, and they're coming here to use her as bait." "Then I'll send her away." Lord Greystone's voice was flat. "Tonight. She'll leave Greystone and never return." "Too late." Lady Ashford produced a letter from her cloak. "They're already here. 3 of them, posing as guests for your house party next week. They'll be watching her, waiting for you to reveal yourself. And when you do, they'll strike." Rowena found her voice. "Then I'll leave before they arrive." "They'll follow you." Lady Ashford's gaze was almost pitying. "You're the key to destroying him. They won't let you simply walk away." "What do you suggest?" Lord Greystone asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Give her to me." Lady Ashford's smile was predatory. "Let me take her to my estate in Scotland. The hunters won't follow there. They don't know about my holdings. She'll be safe, and you'll be free to deal with them without worrying about her safety." "No." Rowena stepped forward, moving around Lord Greystone. "I'm not some chess piece to be moved around the board. If these hunters are coming for me, then I deserve to know why." Lady Ashford's expression shifted to something like respect. "Because you look like the woman who destroyed their founder's brother. Marguerite Beaumont killed a vampire hunter named Thomas Crane during the Revolution. His descendants have been hunting Lord Greystone ever since, believing he was responsible for her actions." "But he wasn't," Rowena said slowly. "She acted on her own." "Yes." Lord Greystone's voice was heavy with old grief. "She died protecting refugees, humans who would have been slaughtered by both sides. Thomas Crane's brother was leading the mob. She stopped him the only way she could." "And now they think you found her reincarnation." Lady Ashford folded the letter carefully. "They believe that if they kill you in front of her, her memories will awaken and she'll lead them to other vampires who aided the refugees. It's nonsense, of course, but they're fanatics. Logic doesn't apply." Rowena felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. She could run, disappear into the anonymity of London's streets. She could accept Lady Ashford's offer of protection, or she could stay and face the hunters alongside the man who looked at her with 2 centuries of longing in his eyes. "I'm staying," she said. "You don't understand what you're risking," Lord Greystone said. "I understand perfectly." Rowena met his gaze. "You said Marguerite died protecting people she loved. Well, I may not be her, but I'm not a coward either. If these hunters are coming, then we'll face them together." "Foolish," Lady Ashford said, but her tone was approving. "Very well. If you insist on playing the heroine, at least let me help you prepare. The hunters will arrive in 4 days. That gives us time to set a trap." "What kind of trap?" Rowena asked. Lady Ashford's smile was sharp. "The kind that turns hunters into prey." The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Lady Ashford proved to be a ruthless strategist, transforming Greystone from a quiet country estate into a carefully orchestrated stage. Rowena was moved from the servants' quarters to a guest room, given dresses that had belonged to Marguerite, and taught to move through the house as though she owned it. "They expect you to be bait," Lady Ashford explained as she adjusted Rowena's hair. "So we'll give them bait, but bait with teeth." Lord Greystone watched these preparations with growing unease. On the third night, he found Rowena in the library, studying a map of the estate's grounds. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes, I do." Rowena didn't look up from the map. Lady Ashford explained the plan. "I'll be visible at the house party, drawing their attention while you and she identify which guests are the hunters. Once we know who they are, we'll expose them publicly as frauds. Their own social standing will be destroyed, and they'll have to retreat." "And if they don't retreat?" Lord Greystone moved closer. "If they decide to attack regardless of the consequences, then we'll have witnesses." Rowena finally met his gaze. "Lady Ashford has invited 3 members of Parliament and a bishop. The hunters can't act openly in front of such company without revealing their own fanaticism." "You've thought of everything." "Lady Ashford has thought of everything." Rowena set down the map. "I'm simply following her instructions." "No." Lord Greystone reached out, his cold fingers brushing her cheek. "You're being brave and foolish and magnificent, just like she was." Rowena pulled back. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't compare me to her." Rowena's voice was sharp. "Every time you look at me, I see it in your eyes. You're searching for her, hoping I'll say something she would have said, move the way she moved. But I'm not Marguerite, and I never will be." Lord Greystone was silent for a long moment. "You're right," he said finally. "I have been looking for her in you, but I'm beginning to realize that's not what I want." "What do you want?" "To know you." He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "To learn what makes you laugh, what keeps you awake at night, what you dream of when you allow yourself to dream." Not because you remind me of someone I lost, but because you're yourself. And that's far more interesting than any ghost. Rowena felt something loosen in her chest. I dream of having choices again, she said quietly. Of being more than someone's servant or someone's shadow. I dream of mattering. You matter to me. Lord Greystone raised her hand to his lips, and this time he kissed it. A cool, gentle pressure. Not as a replacement, as yourself. Before Rowena could respond, Lady Ashford appeared in the doorway. They've arrived, she said. 2 men and a woman, traveling as the Hartwell family. They're asking to see the portrait gallery. Of course they are. Lord Greystone released Rowena's hand. They want to see Marguerite's portrait, to confirm the resemblance. Then let's not disappoint them. Rowena straightened her shoulders. It's time to begin. The house party began with all the elegant formality of Victorian society. Rowena, dressed in one of Marguerite's gowns, descended the main staircase and felt every eye in the entrance hall turn toward her. She saw the 3 hunters immediately. They stood together near the portrait gallery door, their expressions carefully neutral, but their gazes sharp with recognition. Miss Finch, Lord Greystone said, offering his arm, allow me to introduce you to my guests. The introductions were a careful dance of lies and half-truths. The hunters called themselves the Hartwell family, a father, son, and daughter traveling from Yorkshire. They were polite, cultured, and utterly focused on Rowena. You have a remarkable face, Miss Finch, the father said. Has anyone ever told you that you resemble the portrait in the gallery? I've been told I have common features, Rowena replied, her voice steady. Nothing remarkable about them. On the contrary. The daughter, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine, smiled. You could be Marguerite Beaumont's twin. It's quite uncanny. Perhaps we're distant relations. Rowena allowed Lord Greystone to lead her toward the dining room. Stranger things have happened. The dinner was an exercise in tension. Rowena sat between Lord Greystone and the bishop Lady Ashford had invited, while the hunters watched from across the table. Conversation flowed around topics of politics and weather, but Rowena felt the undercurrent of danger in every word. It was the son, a young man named James, who finally made his move. Lord Greystone, he said, his voice carrying across the table, I've heard fascinating stories about your family. They say the Greystones have lived in this house for over 200 years without aging a day. The table fell silent. Lord Greystone set down his wineglass. Stories often exaggerate, he said mildly. I assure you, I age like any man. Do you? James leaned forward. Because I've seen records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death notices, and they all describe men named Greystone who look exactly like you. Same height, same coloring, same distinctive eyes. A family resemblance, Lady Ashford interjected smoothly. The Greystones breed true. Or they don't breed at all, Catherine's voice was cold, because they're not human. The bishop cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, such accusations are hardly appropriate dinner conversation. Aren't they? Catherine stood, her hand moving to her reticule. When we're dining with a monster who has murdered countless innocents? Sit down, Lord Greystone said, and there was power in his voice, ancient and terrible. You will not threaten my guests. Your guests? The father rose as well. This woman is no guest. She's bait. You've dressed her in Marguerite's clothes, paraded her before us, hoping we'd reveal ourselves. Well, we have. Now face the consequences. He pulled a wooden stake from his coat, and chaos erupted. The other guests screamed and scrambled away from the table. Lady Ashford moved with inhuman speed, placing herself between the hunters and Rowena, and Lord Greystone simply stood, his expression sad. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, he said. You killed my great-grandfather, the father snarled. You and that French witch. Marguerite killed a man who was leading a mob to slaughter refugees, Lord Greystone corrected. Your great-grandfather was a murderer. She stopped him. Lies! James pulled out a pistol, loaded with silver bullets, Rowena realized with horror. You corrupted her, turned her into a monster like yourself. No! Rowena stepped forward, moving past Lady Ashford's protective stance. You're wrong. Miss Finch, don't. Lord Greystone reached for her, but she evaded his grasp. I may not remember being Marguerite, Rowena said, her voice ringing through the dining room. But I know what it means to choose between safety and conscience. Your great-grandfather was hunting innocent people. Marguerite stopped him because no one else would. That doesn't make her a monster. It makes her a hero. She was a vampire's thrall, Catherine spat. She was a woman with courage. Rowena turned to the other guests, the members of Parliament, the bishop, the society matrons who had come for entertainment, and found themselves in the middle of a confrontation. These people came here to murder Lord Greystone based on 200-year-old grudges. They brought weapons to a dinner party, they threatened violence in front of witnesses, and they call themselves hunters of evil? The bishop stood slowly. Miss Hartwell, put down your weapon. Your Grace, you don't understand. I understand that you've just confessed to planning murder in my presence. The bishop's voice was stern. Whatever Lord Greystone may or may not be, you've violated every law of hospitality and decency. Leave this house immediately, or I'll have you arrested. The hunters looked at each other, their certainty crumbling in the face of social condemnation. Finally, the father lowered his stake. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Lord Greystone replied quietly. It is. You've been exposed as fanatics in front of witnesses who will carry this story throughout society. Your family name is ruined, and if you ever threaten anyone under my protection again, I will ensure you face legal consequences. Lady Ashford smiled. I believe the bishop mentioned arrests. Shall I summon the constable? The hunters fled, leaving their weapons scattered on the dining room floor. The other guests erupted into excited chatter, already composing the letters they would write about this extraordinary evening. Rowena stood in the center of it all, shaking with reaction. Lord Greystone took her arm gently. Come, he said. You need air. He led her to the conservatory, the same place where this had all begun. Rowena sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. That was incredibly foolish, Lord Greystone said, but his voice was warm. You could have been hurt. So could you. Rowena looked up at him. That's why I spoke. Because I realized something while they were threatening you. What? That I don't care if you see Marguerite when you look at me, because when I look at you, I see someone worth protecting. She stood, moving closer. I see someone who has spent 2 centuries mourning a woman who died being brave. Someone who needs to learn that bravery isn't always about dying. Sometimes it's about living. Lord Greystone reached out, his cold hand cupping her face. You're extraordinary. I'm ordinary. Rowena covered his hand with hers. But perhaps ordinary is what you need. Someone who isn't a ghost or a memory, someone who's simply here. I'm beginning to believe you're right. He leaned forward, and Rowena felt his cool breath against her lips. May I kiss you? Yes. The kiss was gentle and cold and perfect. When they finally drew apart, Rowena saw that his eyes were wet with tears that would never fall. I loved her, he said quietly. I'll always love her. But I think I could love you too, not instead of her, alongside her, if you'll let me. Rowena smiled. I think I'd like that. Lady Ashford appeared in the doorway, her expression amused. The guests are leaving. Apparently they've had quite enough excitement for one evening, though I suspect will be the talk of London for months. Let them talk, Lord Greystone said, not taking his eyes from Rowena. I'm done hiding. Good. Lady Ashford's smile was genuine. Because I've just received word from the Covenant. They're willing to grant you dispensation to court a human openly, provided she understands the risks. What risks? Rowena asked. Immortality, if you choose it. Lady Ashford's gaze was serious. or a human lifetime with a man who will watch you age while he remains unchanged. Either way, it won't be easy. Rowena looked at Lord Greystone, at the hope and fear mingled in his expression. She thought of Marguerite, who had faced death with courage. She thought of her father, who had taught her to value truth over comfort. And she thought of herself, not a shadow or a replacement, but simply Rowena Finch, a woman who had survived loss and discovered she was stronger than she'd imagined. "I don't need easy," she said. "I just need honest." Lord Greystone pulled her close, and Rowena felt the coldness of his embrace and didn't mind at all. "Then I'll give you honest," he promised, "for as long as you'll have me." 3 years later, Rowena stood in the portrait gallery, looking at two paintings that hung side by side. On the left, Marguerite in her midnight blue gown, confident and fierce. On the right, a new portrait, Rowena herself, dressed in emerald green, her hand resting on a stack of books. Different women, different lives, but connected by something deeper than resemblance. "She would have liked you," Lord Greystone said, coming to stand beside her. "I hope so." Rowena leaned against him, comfortable with his coldness now. "I like to think we would have been friends. More than friends." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "Sisters in courage." Rowena smiled, looking at the two portraits, past and present, memory and reality, both equally real and equally loved. She had made her choice 3 years ago, accepting the gift of immortality not to become Marguerite, but to have time to become fully herself. And every day since, Lord Greystone had proven he loved her for exactly that. "Come," she said, taking his hand. "Lady Ashford is arriving for dinner, and you know how she hates to be kept waiting." They left the gallery together, walking through the house that was now truly theirs, not haunted by ghosts, but filled with the possibility of countless tomorrows. Behind them, the two portraits watched with painted eyes, bearing witness to a love that had learned to honor the past without being imprisoned by it.